The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Good evening and welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic show. Thank you for being with us tonight. Our topic, leadership, focuses on leaders such as yourselves. We believe that leadership is a skill that can be learned through practice and awareness. Our very special guest tonight is Susan McPherson. Susan is a serial connector, angel investor, and corporate responsibility expert. She's the founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, a communications consultancy focusing on the intersection between brands and social impact, providing storytelling, partnership creation, and visibility to corporations, NGOs, and social enterprises. She's a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and Forbes, and has 25 plus years experience in marketing, public relations, and sustainability communications. She is a featured speaker at industry events including Net Impact, InspireFest Dublin, Center for Corporate Citizenship's Annual Summit, DLD, TOA Berlin, and Technonomy. Susan founded and hosts the bi-weekly SCR Chat on Twitter and is a regular guest on a variety of podcasts. Susan is a Vital Voices Global Corporate Ambassador and was named as one of Fortune's 55 most influential women on Twitter, 40 women to watch over 40, Ella Magazine's top 25 women on Twitter, and Fast Company's 25 smartest women on Twitter. Susan, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Susan, you're the founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies. Can you tell us more about your company?
Sure. We're coming up on a 5-year anniversary, and we are a consultancy that focuses on the communications of a brand's social impact, a company's social impact, as well as building partnerships between corporations and NGOs so that they can be putting together some positive, good programs for the betterment of the planet.
What inspired you to start your own company?
Well, it's actually a very comical story. I was working for another boutique consultancy, and there happened to be a lot of the best talent leaving. And anyone who works in the world of consulting knows you are only as good as the people that you work with and work for and support you. So I knew the writing was on the wall that I needed to move on, but I had no idea what I was going to do next. And a couple of organizations told me, Susan, if you leave and go out on your own, we will hire you for a consulting engagement. So I left on a Friday and I started consulting on a Monday because I was so terrified that those two organizations would change their mind. And I named the firm McPherson Strategies thinking it was just going to be a placeholder for a little bit of time. And here's why I would never have named it that. Number one, it's not that I'm criticizing others who name their companies after their own name, but that just isn't who I am, and I feel almost like it's a narcissistic thing to do, which I'm the opposite of. And secondly, it's my ex-husband's name, and he's a great guy, so there's nothing wrong there, but it just seems funny that that became the name of the company. But again, I really thought it was just going to be, a 6 months, maybe 8 months kind of gig until I found the next full-time job. So I didn't have this mass yearning to be an entrepreneur and to build a company. In fact, I didn't really even think I had the wherewithal to do it. So that's a little background on how it got started.
In our conversation prior to this interview, you mentioned that your parents had a big impact on you, in particular when it comes to social responsibility. Can you talk to us a little bit more about it?
Well, my late father was a history professor at a women's college, so he taught women for 39 years. In some cases, he would have a grandmother, a daughter, and a granddaughter because his legend would be passed on. And he fervently believed that women and girls should have equal opportunities for education. So that was always kind of stuck in my head. And obviously, to this day, I do a lot on behalf of women and girls causes, education being one. And my late mother went back to work when I was 6. And in the early 70s, that was very rare for moms to be working full time. So if anything, that taught me to be very resourceful, since I would come home from school in the afternoons and be alone. Both my brother and sister were several years older than me. And she also, believe it or not, did communications and public relations. And so she taught me it was all about connecting with other people to make things happen. And she often said to me, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And she taught me the whole notion of decency and gratitude, because I would see how she would constantly reach out to her network via a typewriter, I mind you. But she believed fervently in the power of gratitude, the power of saying thank you, and the power of recognizing people. So very differing kind of situations between both of them, but they did fervently believe in service. And she actually worked for public television. And when I was a young daughter, I would say to her, Mom, why don't you work for, one of the commercial broadcast stations, ABC or CBS? And she would always say, yes, I'd make more money, but the cause isn't there. And the content is nowhere near as sophisticated and important and vital as it is on public television.
During your career, you moved many times, and I know that your father was very supportive about it and gave you very good advice. Could you share that advice with us?
Well, my late father said to me, Susan, nothing is a prison sentence. I mean, of course, unless it's a prison sentence. But his notion was, when I was moving from Seattle to New York and I was nervous, he said, Seattle will always be there and you can go back. And the scared voice in my head always told me, well, if my job doesn't work, I can always go back to waitressing, because in college I was a wonderful waitress and made lots of good money. So anyhow, I think that gives you a bit of idea of how that advice has reared its voice in my head over and over again. If you don't take risks, you will not find rewards.
With your company, you have become a very successful entrepreneur. And I was wondering, what are the suggestions that you might have for entrepreneurs to help them become successful?
Well, considering I was someone who didn't think I could be an entrepreneur, I think one of the number one rules that has aided and abated me over the last 5 years and really helped us excel is surround yourself with the people who are good at doing all the things that you're terrible at doing. And then, to echo my mom, be constantly connecting with people, but not for the sake of just building a network. Connect with people to see how you can assist them, because in the end, they will come back to assist you. It's a wonderful, wonderful way the world works. I also think it's really important to pay people what they're worth, even if it means potentially less money going into your own pocket, if you want to make your business successful. And do with others what you would like them to do unto you. I really, really, really believe that being kind is actually the best mode operandi. Oftentimes, we look back at the 80s and 90s and women were taught that they had to be tough and they couldn't cry and they had to be strong and not act like women, whatever that means. And I don't operate my company that way. I have 8 all-female employees, and believe me, I'm sensitive and caring and compassionate as I would want someone to be to me.
So would you say that being compassionate and caring are one of the most important traits of being a good leader?
Absolutely caring and compassionate. I believe also being willing to take risks. And again, I do that all the time. I think it's also allowing yourself to fail and making mistakes. And when you do make a mistake, own up to it and be transparent about it, because in the end, your team, your clients, the people who purchase from you will respect you more, because I always say, we're all human and we all make mistakes. And if you don't make a mistake, then you're not learning.
And what are your thoughts and experiences with setbacks?
Setbacks probably have more to do with personal things happening in my life. My mother was killed in a horrible tragedy when I was just starting out professionally. I had just graduated college. And that, just from a personal standpoint, just caused undue harm and sadness, which made it very challenging probably for the first year or so to get myself excited to move forward. I would also say a divorce in my late 30s also was challenging. And I realized, we're not supposed to take our personal lives to our professional lives, but we are one body, one human. And that can be very detrimental to one's career. But I would say, professionally speaking, I think lack of my own confidence in my 20s and 30s definitely held me back. Perhaps at times lack of self-esteem. I think working professionally in the 80s and 90s and working for corporations, I definitely butted up against glass ceilings and to very much male patriarchies, that there were only a token few that made it through. And those that made it through oftentimes didn't help their sisters along the way because there were such few slots available. So I would think that also had a negative effect at times. And I'll be honest with you, since I've been running my company for the last 5 years, it would be very challenging to go back to that world. Now, I would like to believe that world has changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years, but we're witnessing the whole Me Too situation, and also equal pay is still not the law of the land. So I would say all of the above.
You mentioned previously that you started your company 5 years ago, and currently with your company, you're advising various corporations on social corporate responsibility.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about it?
Oh, sure. Many, many years ago in this country, corporate responsibility was basically run by the purview of the CEO, and it very much was motivated by either providing a check to the charity of the CEO's choice. Perhaps, it could be the naming of a hospital or buying a table at a few galas. It was also designed to keep regulators at bay, certainly on the sides of human rights and environmental issues. So it was not anywhere near what we see today, where it's baked into the business, where employees are involved, where it's tied into consumer marketing, where it's about reputation. All of that is fairly new, and probably the newest kind of component of corporate responsibility is corporations stepping up to state their beliefs on social issues, controversial social issues that range from climate change to LGBTQ to immigration reform and refugee challenges, as well as recently stepping up to fight gun violence. So the world of corporate responsibility has changed, and therefore the communications of that has become very, very important, because companies, if they are doing something to help the world or help their local communities, want to talk about that. But also, we live in a transparent world now thanks to social media. So even if it is things they don't want to talk about, they need to talk about it. So it's a very interesting time to be in the field that we are in, because we are helping companies who are traversing this kind of new territory. Do we speak out on a particular issue? What are the ramifications if we do? What are the ramifications if we don't? What are our employees wanting us to do? So these are some of the issues that we grapple with and help our clients and guide them and help them with the messaging so that when they do put it out to the world, that it is on brand, that it's authentic, that it's meaningful, and that people care.
And what would you say to businesses that might not have corporate responsibility programs, or they might not even consider that that should be part of their culture? Why, in your opinion, they should consider having these programs, or if they don't have it, why should they put them on their agendas?
So if you want to hire the best employees, and if you want to keep the best employees, you sure as hell better have some sort of corporate responsibility programs being planned. And I don't mean just for the big guys. I mean for startups and smaller companies and retailers and even B2B companies, because now sometimes on an RFP, let's say you're a computer manufacturer and an RFP comes in, at the bottom of that RFP, oftentimes it now says, what are your social responsibility programs? What NGOs are you funding? How are you limiting your footprint as a corporation? And so that is very, very common.
Some experts believe that customers can make an impact on companies to be more sustainable and do more social good. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Customers, employees, boards of directors, investors, everyone has a voice, and everyone has a voice with their pocketbook, which definitely can be helpful. Customers can certainly make their voice heard on social media, on the company's website, but also by choosing to buy a competitive product. And interestingly enough, after the Charlottesville tragedy last summer, it was more from the employees of the companies that drove companies to speak up, which was a very new phenomenon.
So we talked about SCR and the importance of SCR, or social corporate responsibility. And I was wondering if you could share with us the first things you do when you start advising companies on SCR.
Well, it much depends on the scope of the engagement, whether we are helping the company that has already, been years working in the industry and maybe, or for years have been working on their social platform. We would have a very different approach than, say, a company that has yet to even figure out what its cause is going to be and how it's going to get its employees involved and who it's going to partner with. So much depends on the specific engagement. But obviously the first thing we do is a deep dive in terms of research, understanding what is one making the company or the organization wanting to do such a thing, what is the motivation behind it, and two, who are those within the organization that are going to make it happen. Whether there is an existing corporate responsibility team or if there's actually, kind of a, let's say, not a formal team, but people that are going to be doing the work part-time. And then often we'll look at the kind of peer space. What are organizations that are in the same sandbox doing? And that helps us find out what's going to be a unique program, perhaps. So that gives you an idea, but everything we do is very customizable, which is good and bad. It means that there's never an easy win, meaning you can't just go in and be like, okay, here are your 10 things you got to do. So it is very custom to the particular company, the industry they're in, the size of the company, the budget, the length of the engagement, all of that kind of plays a role.
You mentioned that you work with B Corp companies, and I was wondering if you could talk to us about the difference between B Corp companies and traditional companies, because I assume there is a difference.
The difference between a B Corp company and a traditional company is that the company exists for two reasons. One, to make profit, and two, to give back. So with a B Corp, it's not just like a nice to have, it's actually part of why the company exists. So think of Method Cleaners, think of Patagonia, think of Ben & Jerry's. Those are companies that from the get-go were all about giving back, and it was part of their DNA. Warby Parker, and a few others will come to mind. But in their actual corporate structure, they have to be giving back. It is not a nice to have.
So can a regular corporation decide to become a B Corp down the road?
Absolutely. If there's a rigorous application process and you have to meet a variety of strict levels, and once you do that, you can declare yourself and you can file as a B Corp.
And what would be the process of becoming a B Corp?
Sure. I encourage everyone, no matter the company that you're in, to actually go to https://bcorporation.net and do the questionnaire, because just the questionnaire will help you realize where you may be kind of falling short on certain things, like do you pay health care for all of your employees? Do you pay a living wage? Do you give people fair time vacation? There's all sorts of questions that will force you to kind of do a thorough house cleaning to find out what's going on in your business, no matter how large or small that you are. What percentage of your revenues do you give to charity? These are the types of questions that you will find.
So what you're saying to us is that the company needs to meet certain standards to become a B Corp.
Exactly.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, Susan. And I'd like to talk about the concept that you mentioned in one of your presentations, which is that we are all, in your opinion, philanthropists. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that concept?
Well, since the advent of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn, we have access to so much more than we ever did before in terms of finding out what's going on in the world, finding out what social causes we can get behind. And it used to be that when we would think about philanthropy, it was very much the purview of the ultra, high net worth individuals that, we saw on TV or read in magazines, Town and Country magazine or Departures magazine. But now anyone and everyone can give $1 here, can give $10 there, can get involved volunteering. If you don't have the means to give, you can easily volunteer and you can share information with other people, because I consider that to be philanthropic behavior. One of our clients is the Women in Philanthropy Institute that does these benchmark studies on women's giving and giving by age, by location, by zip code. And an interesting study all their studies are interesting, but a couple of years ago, one of the ones that I found to be extraordinarily pivotal in my mind was that those giving the highest percentage of their income was women at the lowest level of the pay scale. So even a woman who, works at a supermarket checkout is going to give a higher percentage of her income than a female executive at a Fortune 100 company in terms of percentage. Now, not, obviously in terms of dollar amounts. If that person has the means to give, we all have the means to give.
Prior to this interview, we spoke about your philanthropic work, and I know that you are a board member of quite a few non-for-profit organizations. We also talked about your recent trip to a refugee camp. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and your philanthropic work?
Well, some people call me crazy because right now I am on 4 nonprofit boards. And when you are a member of a nonprofit board, you have a responsibility to be advocating for the cause as well as fundraising for the cause. And one of the boards I serve on is called USA for UNHCR, and UNHCR is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Okay? And it is headquartered in Europe, and USA for UNHCR's remit is to provide advocacy and to fundraise on behalf of refugees around the world within the United States. So we talk and work with the private sector, high net worth individuals, and then anyone else who might care about refugees. Every year I try to take a journey somewhere in the world to actually better understand, 1, what it's like to be a refugee, 2, why we are facing the largest amount of displaced people in the world than ever before in human history, and why it's not going away, as well as what are some long-term solutions. And 3 years ago, I went to refugee camps in Kenya and Uganda. Last year, I went to Sicily to witness the boat rescues in the Mediterranean. And just last week, I was at the Syrian-Jordanian border visiting refugee camps there to talk to Syrians who had fled to find safety and asylum in Jordan. And it was a remarkable experience, tragic, sad, enlightening, gratifying, hopeful. And I realize all those words don't really match up, but the emotions you feel are very much matching those depending on the conversation you're holding and where you're holding it.
And in meeting the refugees, I was wondering, have they shared any experiences with you, thoughts, concerns about their situation? And if so, what were the most pressing things that they had on their minds?
First of all, I want to point out that no matter where you go on the planet, refugees are us. They care more about their children than they care about themselves, and all they want is a better life for their children. They, in many cases, are educated, doctors, lawyers, businesswomen, businessmen, daughters, mothers, sisters, brothers, cousins, and in most cases, all they want to do is go home. The refugees I met in Kenya and Uganda came everywhere from the Congo to DRC to Somalia to Sudan to Rwanda. And then the refugees I met in Jordan primarily were Syrians, although I did meet some Iraqis and Palestinians as well. I think what was dramatically different about the Syrian refugees versus the refugees I met in sub-Saharan Africa was they had never experienced war before. The refugees that walked, let's say, 300 miles from South Sudan to Kakuma, which is a refugee camp in Kenya, they had spent their whole lives witnessing horrors such as famine and destruction. Syrians grew up in worlds like ours. They had gardens, they went to university, they had a very sophisticated kind of world that they experienced right before the bombs and the war began. So it does make you pause to think, like, that could happen anywhere in the world if it happened there. And interestingly enough, about 88 to 90% of the Syrian refugees who have fled to Jordan do not live in camps. They actually live in urban settings, but are definitely provided support from UNHCR as well as a variety of other NGOs. But that doesn't equate to that being an easy life. They are allowed to work. However, the jobs are few and far between for refugees, since they would be the last to be hired. And many of the urban refugees I spoke with would actually have preferred to be living in the camps, because when you're in the camps, at least there's guaranteed food and shelter, and you are with your peers, so to speak, as opposed to those who are trying to make it very, very limited means within, say, Amman or other cities within the country of Jordan. So that gives you a bit of a lay of the land, but I will tell you that every single refugee I spoke with gave me hope in the sense that they are trying to remain positive. They don't feel at this time that they can go back to Syria unless they're guaranteed that the war is over and that their safety would be protected. But right now, it doesn't seem like that's the case as the war continues.
And after speaking to many refugees, I'm curious to learn, in your opinion, what are the ways that we can actively support them?
Well, for one, we all vote. And right now, the United States is taking in the smallest number of refugees. And I'm sure everybody who's listening is aware of what's happening at our border with Mexico. I think we really need to make sure that our congresspeople, our governors, those we elect to office, are compassionate and understand that our economy has been built for the last 200, 300 years on the backs of refugees coming here. I'm a third generation. My grandparents all came from Eastern Europe and Russia, and they produced children who all went to college and worked very, very hard. And the same people coming from Honduras and Guatemala, they deserve to at least be listened to, and they deserve to be able to apply for asylum. So that's number one. Number two, there are many, many refugee organizations that take volunteers that help work with newly resettled refugees. One in Pittsburgh that I also serve on the board of is called Hello Neighbor. Mm-hmm. And even though we are taking far fewer refugees than ever before, the ones that have come in Pittsburgh and soon to be other cities in the United States, Hello Neighbor actually provides, that local helping hand. How do I register my kids at school? Where do I find the markets? How do I figure out how to get my driver's license? All these things aren't easy when you don't speak the language and when you are just freshly here. So the organization is really set up to help people adjust. And there's lots of other organizations like that. Sharing stories on social media. And of course, if you have any kind of small amounts of money that you want to fund, it's a cause that will definitely benefit from your philanthropy.
Mm-hmm. So Susan, I'm going to switch gears now. And my next question is about social media. You are a celebrity on Twitter. You are the most known as the most connected person in New York City. You're an expert in media and social media. And I was wondering, what would be your advice to folks who want to become effective in social media? And how can one actually become effective?
If I knew that, I'd be a wealthy, wealthy woman. But I'm wealthy with love, so I guess that counts for something. I was an early adopter of all of them, so I think that helped. But I've always looked at these platforms as an extension of my life, not necessarily something that's over here and life is over here, right? I mean, if you think about Twitter as like a dinner party, and when you invite 10, 15 people over to your home for dinner, typically what happens is a conversation. People engage with each other. But if one person is dominating the conversation, what happens?
People leave.
People leave, people tune them out, people don't listen. It works the same way in social media. And I always say we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So we should be listening 50% more than we're speaking, although that doesn't ring true right now because all I'm doing is talking. But what it does say is on social media, you can listen and gain so much. So I'm very, very cognizant of that, and I spend a lot of time reading and showcasing the good that other people are doing rather than talking about what I am doing. And I think just by doing that, I gained a lot of friends. In fact, I've gone to like 4 weddings of people that I have met on Twitter. So I don't think of it as something completely separate. And when people are reticent to get started, I always say just get on and listen. Follow people that perhaps interest you, or follow the hashtags that interest you, whether it's your causes that you care about, whether it's your profession, whether it's sports. I mean, there's anything and everything. Or if you have hobbies like knitting or fishing, you can find it all, and then you can engage with the people that are like-minded. And I will say the last 2 years, a variety of these channels have become very toxic because of trolls and because of a lot of political disparities and arguments. But I wouldn't let that hold you back, because it's merely, you're going to see the people that you follow. You're not going to see the things you don't follow. And sometimes it's good to follow the things you don't like, just so that you can have a better understanding and not be in your bubble. So I honestly think the secrets, if I could kind of simplify it, is 1, don't be intimidated, because when you first start out, you don't have a whole lot of followers. And even if you say something silly, very few people are going to see it or read it or hear it. Secondly, listen more than you speak. I always say that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, meaning we should listen twice as much as we speak. And I use that rule when I'm on the social webs. And therefore, I actually listen to a lot of other people and then engage with them. And when I do typically put out tweets and put out posts, it's almost 75 to 80% showcasing the work of others and showcasing the good others are doing. And by doing all those things, I assure you, you will succeed and make lots of friends and develop a real nice rapport, and also potentially help yourself professionally.
Going back to Twitter, I was wondering, what are the most common questions that you're being asked on Twitter?
Well, I definitely am asked a lot of things about corporate social responsibility. And back in 2010, I started a regular meetup, so to speak, called CSR Chat, and it was a Twitter chat that basically showcased the good work that various individuals and companies and organizations were doing in the corporate responsibility space. Now we do them about once a month. We don't do them as often, but I encourage you all to follow hashtags of those interests that appeal to you, whether it be professional interest, personal interest, sports, music, various subject matter, news. Basically, it's almost like Google in the fact sense that you can find anything and you can engage on all the things you're passionate about.
So moving to a leadership topic, I was wondering, since this show is about leadership, are there any traits that leader needs to have to be truly successful?
I would say be passionate, be compassionate, be a very good listener, and be visionary, and don't be afraid of failure, and remind your people all the time that failure is okay, because that is the only way we learn, when we make mistakes.
This leads me to my next question, which is about the success. Since you work with many corporations and various individuals, I was wondering, how do you evaluate your own success?
If I'm like anyone else, I'm hardest on myself. And honestly, the things that make me feel the most successful is when I make good things happen for other people. That, to me, is when I'm doing a good job in life. But I don't base it on, the money coming in the door. Sometimes I actually get more joy out the money going out the door than I'm able to pay people for the good work that they do.
And I know we spoke about your family being a big influence on your life. And I was wondering, looking back at your career, did you have any role model and mentor besides your family who saw you through difficult times, job transitions, or advised you?
It's sad. I almost didn't until probably my mid-40s. And I highly recommend a book that a friend of mine just wrote called 90s Bitch, and don't let the title offend you. It's really about the fact that, we think that the 90s there was all this women's equality and women's equity happening. And in reality, yes, there were women breaking the glass ceiling, but they were not bringing their sisters along with them. And just look at the media that came out of the 90s and how it vilified women, everyone from Tanya Harding to Anita Hill to Monica Lewinsky. And I think there's something to be true for those of us who really that's when we were growing up in corporate America. And there weren't a lot of women that were willing to take the time to mentor. And it's not to say I couldn't have found male mentors, but I think sometimes women are more comfortable having women as mentors. And maybe that's a problem. Maybe we should have more male advisors or people who don't identify as one or the other. But it wasn't really until my mid-40s. And then I would say they're mentors, but they're also friends. And there are several of those that I look to both professionally and personally. I will say another kind of unique kind of dynamic that I've noticed in the last probably 5 to 7 years is that I don't have a clear delineation between what is professional and what is personal anymore. And I think for many people might cite that as problematic. And I actually cite it as a benefit because it means that I love my job and I love my life, and the two of them are coexisting in one sphere. Many of my friends are professional friends, but also personal friends, so therefore we socialize together. And it's not like in the middle of the day, if I go and I meet with, let's say, an author, that may not have to do with my job, but it is still professionally beneficial. So it's all blurred. The lines are no longer, they're dotted as opposed to straight and exact. So, and it's a very long-winded answer to who my mentors are, but I learn as much from those I mentor myself as those who have advised me now. But I will say that's a fairly recent phenomenon in my life.
You just shared with us that you enjoy also mentoring others. And I was wondering if you can talk to us a little bit more about that experience.
There's probably not a day that goes by that I am not talking to somebody about her desire for a new job or her desire for change or her desire to find her calling in life. And I always do my best to take those meetings. And by doing that, I learn so much. And it keeps me young. And not to say they're all much younger, because I've had many women in their 40s and 50s come to me with, how do I remake myself? How do I reinvent myself? But it's never just one way. I literally get as much from those conversations as I am passing on.
Reinvention seems to be a big topic nowadays. It seems that all of us are going through a lot of transitions. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm still reinventing myself, and I wouldn't doubt in 10 more years that I reinvent myself again. It keeps life exciting, and it keeps us all relevant, which is important.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying to us, it's an ongoing process. It never stops.
Yeah, but it's just like growing. It doesn't mean when you get to a certain age that I'll stop.
And what kind of advice would you give to people who might be scared or afraid or not have a support from the family or community to move in the direction that they need to be?
Well, this is where social media can be really, really helpful because you can connect with anyone. Gone are the days where you had to pick up, go to the yellow pages, find a company or find an organization, then go to switchboard and then go to an assistant to finally leave a message. Now you can actually connect with anyone. I'm not saying that it's foolproof, and you may have to try several times, but you have the means. So shame on you for not trying. And everything is there for the taking, no matter your age, no matter your color, no matter your sex. You've got to at least try. And the more honest and upfront you are about the help you're looking for, the more likely somebody will be kind in response. Because we've all been there. And maybe I'm too optimistic here on this, but I also believe people know if they help others, it helps themselves.
And going back to reinvention, I know that you're an expert on branding, and a lot of people nowadays talk about the connection between reinvention and the branding and the importance of creating a brand that is really aligned with your reinvention so that you can ultimately monetize it. Can you share your thoughts on that?
There's many different ways, but I oftentimes think that the best way to start is to hone an elevator speech of some sort. We do live in this, well, it used to be 130 characters, and now it's 260 characters, but people's attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter, and the amount of noise out there is becoming louder and louder and louder. So it is up to us to develop a 3 or 4 sentence description of what we feel best describes who we are. And you could have a couple of different ones depending on what you are going for in terms of branding yourself or what you're trying to accomplish. But I think it is vitally important to have that and have a landing page or website or somewhere that if somebody goes to the Google and puts your name in there, that something comes up, except in addition to maybe your wedding announcement or, whatever, like one thing where you were in the news 20 years ago. I think it's really, really important to have that, because anytime you go for anything, whether it's a new job or a position on a board or even to volunteer somewhere, the first thing that recipient is going to do is to go to the internet and Google your name or search for your name. And if there's nothing, it's going to be a lot more challenging. Keep it simple, keep it up to date, and have an opinion on things. People want to know people have a perspective. Write blogs, there's plenty of places you can post content about anything and everything. You can post it on Medium, you can post it on LinkedIn, you certainly can post photography on Instagram, and I encourage you to do that, because then when the recipient goes to search for you, there will be a trail, and I often liken it to your breadcrumbs.
I recently spoke to an expert who was conducting a study on women and male engagement on social media, and she said that she found out that males were not concerned about the feedback they would get. They were not concerned about proofreading the content that they were putting on social media versus women. She said that women were more reluctant to post stuff, and if they were posting it, they were more concerned about the feedback they were getting and other things. Since you are a social media celebrity that engages with women and men on a daily basis, I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly haven't found that to be the case, and I am very much female.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume some women are nervous for the trolling reason, but not necessarily because their content isn't going to be accepted. I mean, there's plenty of magazines and platforms and associations and organizations that are very much women-focused and looking for good content. I mean, one of my dear friends, Katie Orenstein, founded the Op-Ed Project probably 8 or 9 years ago at this point, because 85% of the op-eds that were being published in American newspapers were written by men. So she went to study, was that because women were writing them and magazines and newspapers weren't running them, or was it that women just weren't writing them? And it was definitely a combination of both. And she started a whole organization that was about helping people find their voice and then go ahead and use that voice. And of course, the first iteration was to write an opinion piece. And now it's obviously expanded to be not just women, but people of color, people with disabilities, people who generally don't get heard in the public sphere. So I would think that then woe be us if we don't put content out there, because we should be. And we may have to do more to get recognized, which isn't fair, but let's change that dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Nice. What are your thoughts on leadership and generosity?
Well, I see them very much hinged on each other. I think generosity helps drive leadership. And the more generous you are as a leader, the more people are going to respect you and follow your guidance. I think generosity is probably one of those beautiful traits anybody can have.
Any final thoughts?
Don't be afraid. The worst you can do is fail. And it sucks. But you will bounce back, I promise.
And how can people get in contact with you, Susan?
Well, they can certainly find me on Twitter, Susan McP1. And my website is www.mcp, for McPherson, M as in Mary, C as in cat, P as in Paul, strategies.com. And, of course, I'm on LinkedIn and all the other platforms. So McPherson Strategies is the firm, and you can find me there or any of the social platforms.
Thank you very much, Susan, for being a guest on the show.
Thank you.
And with that, thank you all for tuning in and listening to the Leadership with Biana Kovic show. Please remember that you're all leaders in your own rights, and that impact that you make starts with small acts of care, kindness, and generosity. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. Please come back next Monday, August 27, 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Have a great evening and good night.